Hello, and welcome to my presentation on requirements engineering in the context of an agile team. My name is Chase Thorpe, and this presentation was completed for CS 5704 of 2024. I'll be introducing two main concepts during this presentation, requirements engineering and the agile methodology. You may not be familiar with either of these ideas in isolation or how they function when used together, but the goal of this presentation is for you to walk away with a high-level understanding of each topic on its own, as well as the pros, cons, and challenges that each concept introduces to the other. The primary focus will be to gain an understanding of how we can perform requirements engineering in an agile way as more and more teams are being structured in alignment with this methodology. John von Neumann, a mathematician and one of the conceptual inventors of computers as we know them today, said, "There's no sense being exact about something if you don't even know what you're talking about." Requirements engineering describes the process by which we figure out what we're talking about when it comes to designing and implementing software systems. There are multiple models and conceptual processes to perform this task, but the high-level steps can be described in four main phases, with a central question that captures the main concern of each phase. The first phase is elicitation, and the question we can ask at this phase is, what are the wishes and constraints of the stakeholders of this system? This is the phase where we begin to define the scope of the problem and work with the stakeholders to identify what they know they want, what they want or need but might not know it, and what are the constraints on the solution we can build for them. These constraints could be technical, financial, or environmental. The second phase is the analysis phase. Once we have a good idea of the stakeholder requirements, the central question we want to ask at this phase is, do the requirements fit together in a way that makes sense? Are the requirements consistent with each other? And do any requirements conflict with each other? An example of conflicting requirements could be a request for completely on-premises equipment and support, coupled with a requirement to keep costs as low as possible. One of these requirements will have to be adjusted if equipment, infrastructure, support staff, etc. all need to be purchased for an on-site solution. That's definitely not going to be the most cost-effective way to build a system, where something like having portions of the system in the cloud may be cheaper. It's good to discuss these things in the beginning. The third phase is documentation. Once we've analyzed and smoothed out our understanding of the requirements, we want to formalize and organize those requirements as they are understood by the technical team. The question we are asking here is, what do we, the development team, understand the requirements to be? The final phase is verification and validation. At this phase, we want to present our documentation of the requirements to the stakeholders and ensure that documentation aligns with the stakeholder vision. The question we're asking here is, am I building the system right, and am I building the right system? Stepping away from requirements engineering for just a moment, I want to introduce the agile methodology so that we can begin discussing how to implement the phases of requirements engineering in an agile way. The key thing to understand about agile development is that it is an iterative process that primarily focuses on the continuous improvement and delivery of a useful solution to the stakeholders. The methodology accomplishes this through prioritizing the value of being flexible at all stages of a system's lifecycle. This flexibility is particularly important when it comes to the graceful handling of changing requirements, which we will come back to shortly. For now, I want to briefly outline the general flow of an agile team and a couple of the guiding principles of the agile methodology. As you can see on your screen, the agile methodology is comprised of three main phases, with a few sub-items that make up each phase. To quickly summarize this image, we can think about units of work, labeled items in the image, but also known as user stories, which go into a large list called the backlog. We can think of these units of work as one or more requirements that will deliver value to a stakeholder upon completion. The backlog feeds items into the iteration phase in the form of a sprint. A sprint is a relatively short time frame, generally 1 to 4 weeks, but can be longer, in which a selection of items in the backlog, usually prioritized by the stakeholder or the product owner, are worked on and expected to be completed. Then, on a regular basis, one or more sprints are slated for release and delivery to the shareholders, and feedback from that release is filtered back into the planning phase, where we start the process all over again. Compared to something like the waterfall method of development that prioritizes getting as complete of an understanding of the requirements in the beginning as possible, being resistant to those requirements changing, and trying to deliver a finalized product all at once rather than iteratively over time, it's somewhat easy to see how, through an agile approach, we can deliver value more often to our stakeholders and keep them from waiting months or years to begin benefiting from their investment. To emphasize and combine two of the agile principles, we want to frequently deliver value in the form of software. Let's start tying these two concepts together. To summarize what we know so far, we have a 4-phase process to gather our requirements: elicitation, analysis, documentation, and validation and verification, and a 3-phase agile workflow to build our backlog of user stories, iterate on and develop those requirements into realities that we deliver to our customer, get feedback, and start back at the beginning. Let's examine how these two processes work together with a concrete example. Let's say your friend has asked you to build a personal blog. How can we use the two processes we've gone over so far to make sure we have a clear understanding of our friend's needs? According to our agile workflow, the first thing we want to do is start building a backlog with some user stories. We can use the elicitation phase in requirements engineering to do that. Through a conversation with your friend, you found out the following information. Your friend wants her and her visitors to the blog to be able to scroll through brief summaries of all blog posts that have been made. Your friend wants full control to add, edit, and delete individual blog posts. There needs to be a way to navigate to the full blog entry, and visitors to the site should be able to leave comments and likes on blog posts. This is a decent start for high-level requirements. From these 3 bullets, we can likely write more than 3 user stories that can go into our backlog. Let's move on to the analysis phase. There doesn't seem to be any conflicts in these 3 bullets, but is there anything we could use more clarification on? Do we have enough information to build a whole blog at this point? No, and that's completely okay. Doing things in an agile way means we don't have to have all of the answers at the outset. We likely have enough to get started. However, some of the things we should probably ask our friend are things like, do we need authentication for users? Should they be able to create some sort of profile and personalize their account in some way? What kind of moderation capabilities do you need? As we move into the documentation phase, a good thing to do here might be to generate a UML diagram of our data model to help us begin our development. This is a simple representation of what our data model might need to look like for our blog. At this point, we likely have a handful of stories in our backlog. We have a decent idea of what our backend data model will need to look like. Now we want to start building the blog with the guiding principle being to deliver value to our customer as often as possible. Let's prioritize our backlog and get to work. Let's say we have these 5 stories in our backlog, and we're trying to organize and prioritize our first sprint. What's the best order to go about completing these user stories? Pause the video for a moment and maybe jot down which order you would approach completing these stories. Okay, what did you come up with? There's no concrete one correct answer here, but we can probably make some logical choices. For example, in order to have any sort of editing or deletion capability, I probably need creation and read capability first. If it was me, I would complete these stories in the following order. First, I'd create a basic homepage with some mocked blog entries to display. This would be item number 4. Then I would add a button that lets me write a new blog post, item 3. From there, I would start to add the ability to edit and delete blog posts, item 2. At this point, I can probably start thinking about comments from other users. But to do that, I need the ability to sign up, log in, etc. That wasn't even listed in my backlog. This is a good example of how the agile approach encourages and is resilient to change. At this point, getting user accounts set up and working is the next highest priority, so I can add that story to my backlog and get to work on it. Once I have accounts, I can set up the ability to add comments. And finally, I would create a way to let the admin user delete comments from other users. Let's see what our sprint would look like with this prioritization in mind. This looks like a pretty decent sprint. The next thing I want to highlight when it comes to agile requirements engineering is the cyclical nature of agile requirements. It's perfectly possible that we get through all 6 of these stories in our first sprint. It's also possible that we run into roadblocks and only get through 4 of the 6 items, and the last 2 get pushed to the next sprint. Another possibility is that through the implementation of these first stories, we discover previously unthought of requirements and have to generate more user stories, and possibly even reprioritize our current or future sprints. Let's say, for example, that rather than fully deleting blogs, your friend just wants the ability to archive and hide posts from their users, more of a soft versus hard delete. This is another user story. How should it be prioritized? Is it a work stoppage that must be dealt with now? That's a question for your product owner. The point is, no matter which of the scenarios I listed above become reality, At the end of our sprint, we will still have some minimum viable product that we can deliver to our friend so they can see progress and hopefully have something they can begin using, even if it doesn't have all of the bells and whistles it will eventually have. After getting feedback from our friend on the deliverable from Sprint 1, we can iterate back to our backlog and start again with Sprint 2. This has been a very brief overview of two topics that one could spend many hours talking about and breaking down in detail. But there are a few basic things from Agile requirements engineering I'd like for you to take away from this presentation that I think will help you in your projects moving forward. First, try to let your main priority be to deliver value to your customers as often as possible in the form of usable software. At the end of the day, that's what we're here for. Second, try to think about the requirements of your project as a living thing that will grow and change over time, and be receptive to those changes. Utilize tools like Jira, Kanban boards, or any other tools you like to break your requirements down into actionable user stories, and prioritize them in alignment with your product owner's needs. And finally, just as Agile is an iterative process, your adoption of it can be too. Don't feel like you need to completely abandon the other ways you've thought about solving problems in favor of this. If there are aspects to this form of requirements, engineering, or problem deconstruction you like, feel free to take just that and include it in the processes you have already established. Thank you for your time and attention.